Hello gamers, Power Word Heal here, and today we are doing our first Shaman video on the channel, I think, at least the first one for WoW Classic, and we are going to be talking about the Shaman's Blackwing Lair BiS list. So we're going to do some more Shaman content to kind of like backfill some of the stuff we missed. We'll do one for like pre-BiS just in case people are leveling up Shamans, and we'll make a video talking about like the, we'll just call it MC BiS, but we'll basically just talk about the good items you can get in Molten Core. So those will be for, people who are obviously still leveling up and stuff. But today we're going to hop right into Blackwing Lair since that's coming out soon. And we're going to do this in the same format that we do the other videos. We are basically just going to touch upon, what the actual BiS is, and then what alternatives are that might be easier to get. And then we're also going to start this off by talking about the philosophy behind how we're ranking items, right? Just to make sure we have a good base here. So we'll kind of do that right away. And basically, this class is just a throughput class in Classic WoW, which means that you're mostly trying to do as much healing as possible, regardless of whether your main target is like the tank or just healing the raid or whatever. You want to be pumping out chain heal. You want to be getting as much value from it as you can, typically speaking, right? So with that in mind, we heavily value plus healing. And Chain Heal is kind of a special case because since it hits multiple targets, the coefficient on it is actually quite good when you add up all the coefficient from each individual bounce. I believe it's somewhere close to 1 or 100%. So you're basically kind of getting full value from all your effective healing. Now, the caveat there is that Chain Heal is a little bit harder to use than some other spells because it's auto target in a sense, which you'd think would make it easier to use. But I guess what I mean is there are certain parameters that have to be followed for the heal, and it's not necessarily, if you're using it to heal a tank or something, for example, it's not necessarily just going to find value. There has to be value there, right? So if people are full, it's just going to do overhealing with the other bounces. So even though the coefficient's good, there's still a lot of potential for overhealing on the Shaman, right? But you still, there's going to be plenty of times where you get full value out of Chain Heal. So that's what you want to play for, is kind of the idea. So this set is going to have a heavy focus on plus healing. And it's going to have, I would say, about the same amount of regen as you could get on any other class outside of special regen mechanics. So for example, it's just not going to have as much spirit on priests because the gear is just different, right? It's not going to have as much MP5 because it doesn't have an equivalent for priest or druid tier 3 set tier 2. So it's going to be lagging behind on regen, but that's not really anything you can change. You can't really gear the class to be super regen heavy. You can at most just pick up some additional regen pieces here and there. So that's why at the end of the day, we mostly just focus on plus healing. And there's going to be basically 3 different sets that we're going to talk about for Shaman that are all kind of BiS in their own way. And so what we're going to actually do first is we're going to talk about things that don't affect any of the sets, right? And then we'll kind of go back and we'll talk about, the stuff that will fit in certain sets and won't fit in other sets, right? So I think the safest item to start with is Animated Chain Neck. This is just hard BiS in my opinion on this class. I mean, if we open this up, you can see there's kind of another equivalent that is from the... Oh, is this the right phase? It is phase 3, right? Oh, yeah. We have an Orb of the Dark Moon. You have to be careful when you open up websites like this, because basically what it has you do is you just... you have to pick a stat weight, a pre-selection, right, in order for it to allow you to start making a gear set. Now, you can obviously set one that's custom, but most of you guys aren't going to have an idea of stat weights off the top of your head. And when I usually make these videos, I just use the default one that they provide because I don't really care about the actual stat weights that they're giving me. I just care about, the actual being able to just put the pieces up here, right? And the thing is, the healer stat weights are obviously very dynamic and situational anyway. It's not really like DPS stat weights. They can sometimes be dynamic, but there's usually a general trend that you want to follow, right? Healers are just highly situational, and it's going to be highly dependent on your raid. So this is set up in a particular way where it's really valuing mana per 5. So if you notice, it puts Pendant of the Fallen Dragon, like right at the top. This is what I would say is like kind of like a it's like a misnomer, right, about shamans, is that they need lots of MP5, or you should be like stacking MP5 on them, right? And I think where the general thought process of this came from is that people observed early on in Original Classic that Priest and Druid, they had more spirit on their gear overall. They also had more in combat regen that's based on that spirit in their talents, and then they also had the 3-piece tier 2 on both of the classes, which again amplify their in combat regen based on spirit. Shaman does not have an equivalent, right? So what people tend to think in their mind is like, oh well, so that means we have to stack as much outside regen as possible on a shaman, but in reality, you just want as much healing as possible, and you are going to pick up regen on the way, right? But don't be misled when you come onto a site like 60 upgrades and you see that the EP here is a little bit messed up. So I just wanted to kind of clear that up right out of the gate. I would basically only use an amulet with healing on it. So something like Enlightened Chain or Choke of Enlightenment, Animated Chain, or Orb of the Dark Moon. You really want to get Animated Chain just because it's kind of like free to get, in the sense that, you have as many chances as you need per day that you can muster up people to go into Undead Strat, right? So this is something that you really do want to pick up. It's not going to be like hard for you to get in the same way that something like Choker the Fire Lord is, right? Technically, Choker the Fire Lord is better, but obviously, good luck getting that over your casters or something like that, right? So this is something, though, you could actually pick up in a GDKP, or not a GDKP, a soft res run. But the thing is that you really want to make sure you have some of your other slots taken care of first. So again, the easiest choice here, just Animated Chain Neck. Now, we're going to skip the shoulders and go into the cloak. Now, technically, the best is Shroud of Pure Thought, because even though you're losing a little bit of healing, gaining 6 MP5 for 10 healing, like, I'll take that all day, right? Already mentioned this with some of the other classes. However, Height of the Wild is basically, like, effectively the same cloak. It's not much of a difference. And basically, any cloak that has, like, a decent amount of healing, like Cloak of the Cosmos, works really well. This is fine, but again, it's a caster item, so you're probably not going to get it. Even something like Saffron Drape is better than nothing, but at this point, we're kind of losing quite a bit of healing, so you'd rather just have Cloak of the Cosmos or Height of the Wild. Again, Height of the Wild is like your more expensive option. I already made a video on this. If you can't get Height of the Wild, just get Cloak of the Cosmos. So that's pretty easy to figure out. And then we're going to actually skip these for now, too. We're going to go to the weapon. So the weapon situation is pretty straightforward. The High Warlord's Mace is simply best. And then I like Lay of the Life Giver because, again, we're just trying to get the max amount of plus healing as possible. You don't need to grab this, though. You can definitely just get something else, like you can get use the High Warlords thing, right? And speaking of this is a perfect time to talk a little bit about shields. So, although Lay of the Life Giver is like the technical BiS in terms of healing, I actually really like an item like Dragon Scale Protector, right? Malistar's Defender I'm not as high on because, there's just no plus healing on it. But with the Dragon Scale Protector, you're basically getting almost the same heal value that you're getting from the Lay of the Life Giver, but you're way tankier, right? And people have this thing with shields where they're like, oh, is it because you can block? And it's not really because you can block. It's more just the armor value in itself. I mean, the blocking is a component of it, but you don't even block for, like, full value typically in this game. Like, it's not like a PoE block where you just block the full value of the hit no matter what. So it's really just the armor value, and 2,700 is quite a huge chunk. Now, Shaman uses mail, right? And not all your pieces will be mail, but a decent bunch of them will be, right? So you'll have a decent base armor, so it's not like you're adding a shield to a priest or something. That'd be insane mitigation percentage. But, I mean, you are still getting quite a bit of mitigation out of the shield, right? Like, you're actually probably going to be, like, fairly similar tankiness to like a DPS warrior if you use the shield, right? Probably more, actually, because it's just covering for so much. So I would definitely use this, and I love getting this item both on Paladin and Shaman. the thing is, it's like, how much prio do you want to give for it, right? Luckily, in a lot of cases, people don't charge you that much prio. They consider it more of like a PvP item. So if you do some PvP and stuff, you might be able to convince your guild to kind of let you kind of get this scot-free, and I would just use it in raids. If I was a raid leader that was kind of like deciding on who to give this shield to, the PvP factor would be one consideration, but I'd also want them, I would prefer that they actually use it in raid if I'm going to give it to them. Because, like I said, it's basically the same as the Life Giver, and it makes you like really tanky. So if a mob gets loose, especially something like a Surger on Gar and Molten Core, this could be the difference between you having buffs and you not having buffs, you know? So I really like this. Like I said, I even like General Shield. It's just, it sucks this doesn't have any, it doesn't have any healing on it, right? It makes it just kind of like harder to justify using. But if you really want to be safe, like I would use something like this on hardcore, like any day of the week. But on softcore, I'd probably wait until I just get my Dragon Scale Protector. The other offhand is obviously the Tome here. I don't think this is good at all, obviously, because it's basically just worse than the Dragon Scale Protector, right? You have 6 less healing and basically even less intellect, and the Spirit does not matter for you very much at all on Shaman. So, yeah. That's basically our thoughts in the offhand. Then let's go back to the main hand for a moment, because let's assume that you're not getting rank 14, right? So if you're not getting rank 14, there's a couple options here, right? The best one obviously is Locomere. That's going to be your BiS. Not really much to say, and pretty damn good shaman weapon. Cloak Chromagus also works. Sometimes this will be given to casters, right? It's going to be a weird weapon situation because a lot of people are probably going to be trying to push rank 14 with the new changes. So I think for a majority of people, they're probably just going to try to avoid taking a big dent in prio by taking a weapon, right? Which means that if you're somebody who's not getting rank 14, it might actually be relatively easy for you to get, it'll probably be easy for you to get a weapon at least, right? Because now we have Cloak Chromagus dropping, we have Locomere, even something like Arstone Hammer is not terrible, even though it's by far the worst option you can have in this tier, obviously, right? But with all these things potentially dropping, you should be able to scoop up one of these relatively soon, right? As long as you have people in your raid that are getting rank 14, because they know they're getting their rank 14 weapon, right? And they're not trying to int their prio on other items by taking an item like this. But if you're not going to get rank 14 anyway, you might as well take it. So yeah, just try and get Locomere. If you can't, get Cloak Chromagus is a very good alternative. And then something like Aura Stone is basically to tide you over until you get those. So that's basically the weapon situation, right? We're going to start with this stuff, and then we'll go into the armor pieces, because that's where things get kind of spicy. So, obviously, the BiS is Pure Elementium and Cauterizing. This is a pretty strong BiS setup for the Shaman, even though you don't really get much use out of the Spirit, because it's just a small amount of Spirit anyway. It's kind of like a one-off, right? You can kind of justify that in the item slot. And then the fact that, you're kind of just going for max healing means that these are pretty decent. If you really wanted to be hyper efficient about dealing out gear, what some guilds might do is they might tell you, well, just run 2 cop bands, right? Because cop bands are not unique. And then you can give the Elementium bands to druids or potentially priests or something like that. I already talked about in my priest video. I'm not super high on Elementium bands, but I could see somebody, making that argument, right? Because you really don't use the Spirit that much, and you're only dropping 10 healing or 9 healing by using another cop band here. So double cop band is basically just as good as Pure Elementium band. Moving down to trinkets, Rejuvenation Gem. This is the best thing that you can get in the entire raid, in my opinion, especially on a Shaman. It's just huge for the the healing and the mana. It's not really much to say other than that, right? It's just a really, really strong trinket. And the other passive trinket that's best, in my opinion, is actually going to be Shard of the Scale. Now, this is kind of because there's just a drought of other good trinkets. Your DM trinket here is only 23 spell power and healing. Your Briarwood Reed is only 29. Mind Tap is just strictly inferior to Shard of the Scale. Obviously, you can use one of these if you want to squeeze out that little bit of extra healing, but this trinket is so strong regen-wise that I think it is kind of worth picking this up if you can get it. It's just a matter of it kind of going to be hard for you to get it. Now, there's another trinket that I recommended for other classes, Dark Moon Card Blue. I'm not as high about this on Shaman for a couple of reasons, because what this trinket is doing is you really need to just make sure you understand what mana regeneration is in this case, right? So it's not giving you mana regeneration out of the ether. It's basically just allowing you to have 100% of mana regeneration while casting, which means that you get your full regen, which you would have if you were just like sitting there, not drinking, not doing anything, right? Just recovering mana. And the problem is that on Shaman, not only is the formula for that worse than on Priest and Druid in terms of the regen you get from that type of regeneration, but it's more so that the gearing you tend to do doesn't lend itself as much to bulking up that regen. For example, Priest and Druid, just a lot of the gear they have on it, they get Spirit like passively, right? You'll see on my character, I'll probably have like 300 and something Spirit on my Priest when I go into Blackwing Lair, at least, maybe 400, right? Depending on exactly what I slot in and stuff. You can see here in this full BiS setup, we're at 187 Spirit. Now, this isn't fully buffed and stuff like that, so it'll go up a little bit. But in some cases, you might even be looking at half the amount of Spirit on the Shaman than the Priest. And so not only is the Priest formula more efficient for Spirit, because they divide their regen by 4, right? Shaman's dividing it by 5, which doesn't seem like much, but as you kind of get more values of Spirit, like bigger values, you start to see a bit of a difference. But again, it's not only that the formula is different, it's that the actual amount of raw Spirit you're getting is just way less on a Shaman. So Dark Moon Card Blue is just less effective on a class like a Shaman. I mean, hey, if you got it like really cheap and you didn't have an alternative trinket or something, it's not like the worst thing you could use by far, but I just wouldn't invest the gold into it when you could just use like a Reed or a normal Dark Moon card trinket or something like, or a normal DM trinket, Dharmal trinket, right? The other problem with this trinket is it's unsuccessful spellcast, and you are putting totems down, which I believe count, but in terms of your actual spells that you're casting, they're pretty long cast time spells. So, yeah, I'm just not like super impressed by this overall, and I would recommend a different option now. Natural Alignment Crystal, this is like, it can be a pretty decent option. It's kind of like your first foray into like a Carhartt or something like that from ZG, right? It's not quite the same, or like a Toep, but it obviously works on a percentage instead of giving a flat, and it increases the mana cost of spells. So this is going to be like heavily situational. My problem with this in a lot of cases is that you're not really suffering on healing value. Like when you have a pretty geared out Shaman, the question you're not asking is like, damn, I wish I had more plus healing. It's usually like, wow, this character costs a lot of mana to run. I wish I had a lower cooldown on mana potion, right? That's why Shamans are kind of like notorious users of the green mana flask, where they just keep doing the flash cheese over and over again to have infinite mana, because they are a very mana hungry class. So if you're not doing something abusive like that, you can just imagine your spells costing 20% more mana can be a little bit problematic. But again, this is not a bad trinket necessarily by any means. It's just a situational trinket. This can be a good parsing trinket, especially on bosses, especially in this version of Classic WoW, because the fights are very short, right? So if you're doing that thing where you just do bosses, then you remax your mana after the fight, then you don't really pay the downside of the 20% increased mana cost of the spell, because most likely the fight is going to be over, by the time you really go or something like that. So a couple things to keep in mind there, and some good notes. And yeah, I think that's basically all of the normal stuff, right? So now we're going to talk about the different variations. And this is one of the only classes that's going to have like true variations. And basically the reason for that is because, there's a couple reasons, but the first reason is that in AQ40, which is going to be the next instance if you're unfamiliar with the game, shamans have access to a 5 set, like it's like called tier 2.5. It's basically in between tier 2, which is this stuff, Helmet of the 10 Storms, and tier 3, which is stuff you'll get from Nax. And what that set does is it reduces the cast time on your chain heal by 0.4 seconds when you have the full set, right? So it actually substantially increases it. It's a huge cast time increase. And it allows you to, especially at the very moment you get it, I think it's definitely a throughput increase. Later on, it can be kind of debated whether it's a throughput increase or not, because you're gaining more cast speed, but you're losing more like overall healing when you compare it to actual Nax gear, right? But right when you get it, it's like highly, highly effective. So what you have to kind of decide on Shaman is if that's something you're going to be going for, in AQ40, because if you are, there's 5 slots you need to like not even think about, which is the helmet, right? The shoulders, the chest, and then the boots and the pants, right? So all 5 of those slots, that's what those are the 5 pieces that drop from AQ40 essentially. So you need a piece, you need the full set, keep in mind, to get the minus 0.4 second bonus. So you need to make sure that you're not basically rolling for loot in those slots, because otherwise it's going to be completely wasted in the next tier. In vanilla, it's very common that there's a lot of carryover, right? And because there's a lot of loot scarcity in this game, right? Ideally, what you're trying to do when you plan out your gear is you want stuff that you're going to be able to keep from multiple content tiers, right? And that's a very common thing in this game, and a lot of times loot is very useful and very competitive between content tiers, and regardless, even if it wasn't, you'd still have to use it because there's not enough loot drops overall, especially on a class of like Shaman where you're going to run like 6 of them, right? So it becomes like very important how you spend your prio, you can think of it as, right? And you really, if you're going for that AQ set to have the faster chain heal, which I do recommend if you're trying to be like the BiS pumper shaman, I think that is kind of like the best way to do that, then you really need to be looking at, keeping the helm, the shoulders, the chest, the leg plates here, and then the boots open for those options in the future. Another thing that's very important is, which we haven't really talked about yet, but this will be important on all of the versions of the Shaman, because if you look at the tier 2, right, you see increases the amount healed by chain heal to targets beyond the first by 30%. That is an absolutely ridiculous set bonus, right? This makes this class really pop off. Like Blackwing Lair is when shamans pop off. It's kind of like when priests pop off. It's when druids pop off, honestly. The healers get way stronger just from their tier sets, typically, in Blackwing Lair. So the thing you have to obviously figure out now if you're using that AQ40 set is, well, can I still get this bonus while getting the 5 out of 5 tier 2.5 from AQ40? And the answer is yes, you can, but you have to do it in a specific slot. So if you are looking to get that 5 out of 5 AQ40 chain heal reduction bonus, right? Then, or chain heal cast speed bonus, then what you have to do is you have to get the Braces of the 10 Storms, right? You have to get the Belt of the 10 Storms, okay? And then the final item is, make sure I'm not messing this up. It's the gloves. Yeah, because the helm, so the helm is going to be, the helm would be tier 2.5, the shoulders, the chest. Yeah, that's what it is. So these are the 3 items you're going to have to use if you're using the AQ40 tier 2.5 set. Why? Because they're the only items you can actually get, right? Because there's 5 items in the other set. There's 3 items you need minimum to get that bonus in this set. So that's 8 of your main core pieces overall, right? And this is the only way you can still get the 3-piece while getting the 5-piece from tier 2.5. So if you're, remember, if you're getting the tier 2.5, the only tier 2 pieces you care about are bracers, gauntlets, and belt. And you should really communicate with your guild about this, because it's actually very important for a number of reasons. Obviously, just for loot distribution and generally, it's really good, right? But also this belt that we had in here before, the Corehound belt, this is an incredibly strong belt if you're not going for the AQ40 tier 2.5 set, right? And this belt is quite expensive to make in terms of mats, because it costs cores from MC, which on Night Slayer at least are like 100 and some gold a piece, and you need 8 of them. So the belt, like, raw gold wise, is probably like over 1k gold. Now your guild is probably going to provide you the cores, so if you want this belt, you're probably only going to have to pay like 1 to 200 gold, which is pretty good for a really strong item. But again, it's going to be completely useless, and the core should go to somebody else if you're actually planning on later getting the set from AQ40, right? So I mean, obviously if you have tons of gold to spare, I guess it doesn't matter, right? If you're buying the cores yourself and stuff like that. But if you're, like a more casual guild and you're really trying to optimize loot distribution to get the most out of you can, because you guys aren't like hardcore players that just like hardcore farm all the time, then this type of stuff is really important. You should bring it to your guildie's attention. You should talk to your other shamans about it. Be like, hey, who wants to be the first one to get, this AQ40 gear? And, I'll take the other gear. You take the stuff that benefits the AQ40 gear and pairs with that, right? And what that basically means is you basically want to be giving these items, right? The tier 2 here in these slots, the gauntlets, the belt, and the bracers, to people who are going for that set, right? I would even prioritize it, like, if somebody else is like, hey man, I really need those bracers, like, it's going to make my 3 set. It's like, I would actually just rather give it to the guy that I know is staying in the guild and I know he's getting the 2.5, right? Because it can be really annoying to get, like, it's not hard. You think on the surface it's not really that hard to get a tier piece, right? But the problem is you're going to need multiple of them, and every week it's only like a 1 out of, like, 5 chance or something, or I guess it's like a 2 out of 5 or 2 out of 6. I don't know how it plays out. I guess 2 out of 8 technically, right? Because I think in Blackwing Lair all the stuff tends to come from like the same bosses. Like the shoulders are from Chromagus, the chests are from Nefarian. It's a little bit different in MC because there's a different type of like boss distribution, but still your odds aren't like insane that you're necessarily going to see that with a lot of frequency, right? You can just get very unlucky. So you want to make sure the stuff goes to the right place right off the start. So that's the whole AQ40 spiel, right? Now, if you're not getting that, or you're not getting it like first or something, right, then you have a little bit more options. So we're going to kind of go back to the more traditional BiS here, right, where we've got the bracers, and then, okay, that's everything. So this is like the BiS if you're not getting the AQ40 2.5 set. And basically what we do here is we swap out the tier 2 bracers for the loom guards here because they're just better, right? We use the pants here, right? Because the reason why we use the pants is because they're kind of very similar to what your pre-BiS is, which is your pod rage. You don't lose that much healing, or your salamander skill even. And how we do our tier 2 for shaman, if you're not getting the tier 2.5 from AQ40, is we basically we try and avoid giving you pieces that the AQ40 person would need. So you might have a hard time getting the gloves here, but we're also then trying to avoid losing as much healing as possible, because the shaman tier 2 is really not that great outside of the set bonus, right? A lot of the pieces have kind of like weird stats, or they don't necessarily give a lot of plus healing, which is kind of what we want, right? So we're trying to avoid losing as much as possible while still getting the 3-piece. And basically how that usually works is like the helmet here, right, is pretty good, because the helmet you're most likely going to be using before that is an Earth Fury helmet or Helm of the Life Giver. Obviously, if you have Crystal Adorned Crown, you would use a different helmet than tier 2, right? But most people aren't going to have that. So it's only like a 10 healing or so loss going from Life Giver to this, right? Because you have to combine the the damage and healing and the healing roll there. So it's basically like 27 and then 27 compared to 42, right? So 15 difference, not the biggest deal. If you notice, if we tried to use like the, where are they here? I don't even see them. They disappear, and they really that far down. If you try and use these, right, you're basically dropping 60 healing, which is crazy, right? So the shoulders are really bad. Tier 2 shoulders are really bad. If you try and use the chest, right, the chest basically has like the same plus healing as the it's actually crazy if you look at these, right? The Earth Fury almost looks like it's like better, and it kind of is in a lot of cases. Like it's got the same amount of healing, 1% crit, and like 27 in. So you really want to avoid getting the chest for your tier, or for your 3 set. But sometimes you just need to get it to get your 3 set, depending on the situation. You don't want to shard this gear, at least not when it's allowing people to have their 3 set, right? That'd be very bad. So again, like, you're going to want to try and manipulate things for your own personal benefit. Obviously, that's the point of me kind of giving you the scoop on this stuff. But at the end of the day, somebody is going to have to take some of these items, right? And you just try and find ways to make sure it's not you. But it might have to be you. So just be prepared to take them if needed for the short term, right? One thing I would say is if you are having to take stuff like the shoulders here for tier 2 or the shoulders for the chest, you want to make sure that you're letting your raid leader know, like, hey, I'm kind of taking one for the team here. This isn't good for me, really. Cut me some slack on prio in the future. And that's a pretty reasonable request, because if you are going to be, absorbing loot that's temporarily useful but not BiS, your raid leader should be aware of that. So puts a little bit of extra burden on the raid, but I mean, what can you do at the end of the day, right? And yeah, so the other option here, right, that you can kind of do is, you notice I have the Boots of Pure Thought in. So you're only going to get Boots of Pure Thought, obviously, if you are not getting the tier 2.5 from AQ40, because remember, this is a slot from AQ40, so it would be completely wasted. You couldn't use this with the tier 2.5 from AQ40. But if you are going to get these, right, then you kind of need, well, you don't need, but like the gloves here are your best bet, right, in terms of the most efficient third piece, right? It's always going to pretty much be, like, if you're not planning to use the tier 2.5 in the future, then the helmet and the pants are pretty much always going to be like your core pieces, and then you got to find one more piece after that, right? And the problem is the shoulders have no healing, the chest has a low amount of healing. If you look at the bracers here, 10 storms, no healing on them at all, right? So you basically kind of get hurt every piece you try and sacrifice. And if you try and sacrifice the, if you try and pick up the belt here, again, you lose out on a lot of healing, right? So it just seems like it's kind of like a lose, 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 lose. But yeah, if you're getting these, I would try and get the gloves as well. But if you can't get the gloves, I would take one for the team and just get something like the, if you don't have good shoulders already, right, you can get the shoulders, the tier 2 shoulders. But if you already have wild growth, you're obviously not dropping 60 healing, right? So this is where it gets kind of a little tricky, because it's going to depend on what your gear is, right? So again, let's say we don't want to give the person the gauntlets of Pure Storm, right? Because we're saving those for somebody who's getting the tier 2.5. But you want Boots of Pure Thought, right? So you have the head, you have the pants. You already have wild growth, let's say. So you don't want to drop this for the tier 2 there. You obviously don't want to drop anything for the chest, right? Again, you're kind of in the same spot here with the gloves, because this is one of the pieces that that benefits the tier 2.5 user in AQ40. So, you could request these, but it's kind of going to be the same thing, right? And the belt is kind of going to be the same issue, where you either lose a bunch of healing, and also the belt is required for the tier 2.5 user for AQ40 as well. So it's like, which piece would you get in that case? I mean, I would say that basically, I would just get the chest if I had the Wild Growth Spalders, and then if I didn't have the Wild Growth Spalders, I would keep the Robes of the Exalted, and I would get the chest, or the shoulders here. So if I didn't have Wild Growth, right, I would get this, and then I'd have the 3 set like that. And then if I did have Wild Growth, I would sacrifice that to get this, and this would be the 3 set I'd run. And remember, the whole point of this is we're saving our off pieces, right? The gloves, the belt, and the bracers for tier 2 for the people that need them for the tier 2.5 sets. Now, the other thing you can kind of do, which makes things a lot easier in my opinion, is you sack Prio and Boots of Pure Thought, right? And again, this is, taking into account if you're not getting the tier 2.5 from AQ40. So you sack Prio and Boots of Pure Thought, you're not getting the tier 2.5 from AQ40, and what that allows you to do is run Greaves of the 10 Storms. And what then that allows you to do is gain a bunch of your healing back through the chest, right? So now you're using the 2 pretty good pieces, and you're using a piece that's kind of meh, right? But, you most likely, it was going to be hard to get the boots anyway, right? It was going to be hard to get the equivalent of this slot anyway. So that's why we change out this slot, if that makes sense. So the boots are actually quite a good piece in some scenarios. I know this is getting really messy, but, just try and follow as much as you can. And what we can do is, if you guys have specific questions on your gear setup, because there's so many kind of permutations here, and it's difficult to really accurately go over them in one video. If you guys have questions, just leave them in the comments of the video, right? And I will kind of I'll go through them, and I'll just be okay, get this, or work towards getting this, work towards getting that, because it is a lot to kind of just take in one video. But yeah, we're basically doing our best here, right? So again, just to kind of quickly go over some things, right? If you are getting the tier 2.5, you've confirmed this with your guild, your raid leader, whatever, then the only thing that you care about are the tier 2 belt, right? The tier 2 bracers, and the tier 2 gauntlets, and then obviously, you want your rejuve gem or whatever, but those should be the items that you're mainly trying to get from here, right? If you're not getting the tier 2.5, right, then if you have extra gloves from tier 2, you want to try and use the gloves to make your 3 set, because those are the most efficient, right? If you're trying to get Boots of Pure Thought. But if you can't get the gloves because there's not enough of them, there's a drought, and you need to give them to the tier 2.5 AQ40 users, then you're just going to get the chest most likely, right? And you're going to run your Wild Growth Spalders, or if you don't have Wild Growth Spalders, you're going to run the tier 2 Spalders, and then you're going to run the Robes of the Exalted in its place, right? And then if you don't care and you want to give up Prio on Boots of the Exalted, right, and you're not, running the tier 2.5 set, then you can basically just use the greaves, the pants, and the helmet, and that is going to allow you to use both the Wild Growth Spalders and the Robes of the Exalted, which is basically going to give you the most, it's going to save you the most healing, obviously, if you weren't going to get the Boots of Pure Thought anyways, right? Because these are going to be very similar to all your other boot options that aren't Boots of Pure Thought. So that is basically the rundown. And there's a lot there. It's kind of a little bit complicated, but like I said, if you guys have any questions or anything like that, just feel free to let me know. And yeah, we'll figure it out in the comment section, right? Or you can ask me on stream or whatever. We'll go through it. I pretty much am familiar with a lot of this off the top of my head now, so I should be able to answer you, and even if I can't, I'll just pull it up and do it, right? So thank you guys so much for watching. I hope this helped and provided some clarity, and I think we got everything, just double checking to make sure. Yeah, I think we pretty much went over everything. Yeah. Okay. All right, so thank you again, guys. If you found this helpful, like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.